Good Tuesday morning, Patriots. I'm John O'Connor, and this is O'Connor's Right Stand. I hope everyone's week is off to a great start. Well, to shamefully cross-promote my podcast, yesterday on O'Connor's Quick Strike, I covered the Hamas terrorist that was captured in Louisiana while coming into America through Biden's broken border policy. I discussed the UK's fight against digital IDs and why we should be watching what is happening across the pond. And then we took a gander at Bolivia in South America and their outright rejection of socialism after being under its foot for the past 20 years. So, if you haven't listened to that yet, why not go check that out after you finish here? And, as always, I would love if you could like, subscribe, and or follow the podcast. It really does help out the algorithms. Today, on this show, we're going to be taking a slightly different approach to this ridiculous No Kings protest that happened on Saturday. I'm going to try to look at this from an angle which other outlets are not focusing on. By the end, hopefully I accomplish that goal and give you a few things to think about along the way. So, let's just dive in on this abomination called No Kings. The Right Stand starts now. First, I need you to meet someone. Her name is Asra Nomani. She's not some right-wing talking head trying to score political points. She's a serious investigative journalist who co-founded the Muslim Reform Movement, opposing Islamic extremism. She was a colleague and friend of Wall Street Journal reporter Daniel Pearl, the journalist who was kidnapped and brutally murdered by Pakistani militants in Karachi back in 2002. Since Pearl's death, Nomani has dedicated herself to investigating how ideology, identity politics, and sectarian hatred can turn violent. She founded the Pearl Project, a nonprofit journalism initiative to continue that mission and expose the networks that radicalize people toward violence. For the past several months, Nomani has been investigating the No Kings protests. And Patriots, what she uncovered should terrify every American who cares about honest political discourse and the integrity of our democratic process. The No Kings protests aren't grassroots. We've talked about that in previous episodes. They are a $2.3 billion political machine. Let me say that again because I want this number to sink in. $2.3 billion. Nomani's investigation, published on Fox News, found that the protests are orchestrated by nearly 400 organizations. Not 10, not 50, 400 separate organizations coordinating what they are calling a spontaneous uprising. These include 198 Democratic-aligned nonprofits and political action committees that she initially discovered. Then she found 70 official Democratic National Committee affiliates actively organizing protests across 21 states. Then she uncovered another 118 radical organizations leading the most extreme elements of the protests, with combined annual revenues of about $204 million. Do the addition, Patriots. That's nearly 400 organizations with over $2.3 billion in annual revenues. This isn't a people's movement. This is industrial-scale political warfare dressed up in democracy's clothing. Here's where it gets even worse. Many of these organizations are tax-exempt 501c3 nonprofits. That means they are supposed to be charitable organizations focused on education, advocacy, or social welfare, not political operatives running coordinated campaigns against a sitting president. But they're exploiting their nonprofit status, subsidized by your tax dollars, to wage partisan warfare. Nomani found that billionaire George Soros is directly funding key organizations. Indivisible, one of the main protest organizers, saw its co-founders Lee Greenberg and Ezra Levin receive a $3 million two-year grant from Soros' Open Society Foundations. That's just one organization. The American Civil Liberties Union, a protest partner. The American Federation of Teachers, whose president Randy Weingarten spoke at rallies. Move On, Public Citizen, the Party for Socialism and Liberation, the Democratic Socialists of America, all organizing partners. The coordination goes even deeper. Nomani documented how these groups share No Kings toolkits on Google Docs with pre-written messaging, sample event agendas, mobilization tactics, and tips on getting media attention. They are literally telling organizers to identify at least one group member to be responsible for firing up the crowd. Sample signs are provided. No Kings in America. Stop the shakedown. We are not for sale. Cookie-cutter graphics get deployed across social media. Same messaging, same signage, same hashtags, same tactics, all coordinated from the top down. And it's not just domestic groups. Nomani documented how anti-Israel organizations embedded Palestine contingents into the protests nationwide. Groups like Jewish Voice for Peace, the Palestine American League, the NYC Labor for Palestine, and the UAW Labor for Palestine created dedicated contingents that marched alongside the No Kings crowds. In Philadelphia, protesters spray-painted "Hamas is coming" on statues. In Sacramento, the Palestine American League promoted its Palestine contingent to show California leaders that genocide in Palestine must be on the agenda. And New York City, labor groups invited protesters with signs reading, "From Palestine to Mexico, all the walls have to go," and "No war with Iran." Think about the timing, patriots. Just days before these protests, President Trump brokered a historic peace deal that freed all 20 living Israeli hostages after 738 days in Hamas captivity. He signed the accord in Egypt. He addressed the Israeli Knesset. Even Democrats like Bill Clinton and Susan Rice gave him credit for achieving what Biden couldn't do in 2 years. And these same organizations are out on the streets with pro-Hamas messaging. Nomani created a public database available for anyone to see, showing every connection between these organizations, their funding sources, their coordination networks, and their tactics. This isn't conspiracy theory, patriots. This is documented, verifiable fact. 400 organizations, $2.3 billion in annual revenues, professional protest consultants, Democratic National Committee coordination across 21 states, Soros money, tax-exempt nonprofits potentially violating their legal status. All of it, dressed up in pro-democracy branding. Now let's talk about what actually happened at these protests. Because while the mainstream media showed you smiling grandmothers with hand-painted signs and people oddly dressed in inflatable frog costumes, they conveniently didn't show you what came after. Jason Rantz is a conservative radio host based in Seattle and the author of What's Killing America? Inside the Radical Left's Tragic Destruction of Our Cities. Before the June No Kings protests, Rantz published an opinion piece warning that these rallies would follow the exact same playbook as the 2020 Black Lives Matter riots. Peaceful demonstrations during the day, providing cover for violent radicals who emerge after dark. And patriots, we know he was absolutely right. In June, Seattle saw an estimated 70,000 people march peacefully during the day from Capitol Hill to the Seattle Center. Minor vandalism, angry signs, the usual messaging. Nothing violent during the scheduled protests. But once those crowds began to disperse, militants in black bloc gear, shielded, hooded, masked, stepped forward. They set a Lime scooter on fire near 5th Avenue and Stewart Street. They assaulted police officers. They attacked journalists with mace, including independent journalist Brandy Cruz. In Tukwila, Washington, armed Antifa and militants swarmed a Department of Homeland Security facility, assaulting cops with frozen water bottles, weapons that can cause serious injury. In Portland, radicals forcibly entered an ICE facility. Thankfully, federal agents were able to maintain control. But what happened next was even more disturbing. Antifa groups posted flyers in ICE agents' neighborhoods with their names, addresses, photos of them and their families. accompanied by messages like "No peace for ICE." They even left trash oddly on officers' lawns as intimidation. Over the course of multiple demonstrations at Portland's ICE facilities that summer, only 20 people were arrested. Rantz documented all of it. He showed how the strategy works. Organize a large legal demonstration that attracts families. Get good media coverage. Then, when the permit expires and the crowds start to thin out, the militants make their move. If police respond, organizers claim authorities are cracking down on peaceful protesters. It's calculated, it's coordinated, and Rantz predicted it would happen again in October, and he was right. October 18th saw protesters carrying signs with guillotines in Washington, D.C., demonstrators openly mocking the murder of Charlie Kirk and calling for the killing of Trump's advisor, Stephen Miller. One protester with a Mexican flag making throat-slitting gestures at Kirk supporters. The timeline in Portland tells the real story. The main protest happened during the day with tens of thousands attending. By evening, most had gone home. But around 7:30 p.m., hours after the scheduled event, about 500 demonstrators gathered outside the ICE facility. Federal agents on the roof unleashed tear gas, pepper balls, and flashbangs. The chemical cloud became so thick the building itself wasn't visible from the street. People inside inflatable costumes were choking on the fumes. That's actually pretty funny. In Denver, police arrested multiple protesters who refused to disperse. 11 arrested in Spokane, several in other cities. This is the pattern. The peaceful crowds provide cover. The media focuses on grandmothers in costumes. Then, when cameras leave and soccer moms go home, the real radicals come out. Antifa, Black Bloc, professional agitators, and the media just simply calls it mostly peaceful. Let's talk about those big numbers. 7 million people at over 2,700 events across all 50 states. The largest single-day protest in American history, they said. Get out your calculators. 7 million divided by 2,700 events equals 2,593 people per event on average. Sounds impressive until we start doing more math. 4 cities claim nearly 700,000 combined. New York, 100,000. D.C., 200,000. Chicago, 250,000. San Francisco, 140,000. That's roughly 690,000 people, 10% of the total in just 4 metro areas, which leaves 6.31 million for the remaining 2,696 events. Now, the average drops to 2,341 per event. But we're not done. Houston claimed 13,500 to 15,000. Portland, tens of thousands. Seattle, LA, Boston, Philadelphia, all thousands. When you subtract every major city's number, what's left for the other 2,600 plus events? The reality, most were tiny. Maybe 100 people in small town gatherings, 200 people in rural areas. In Moab, Utah, one resident described it, and I quote, "The whole town marched down one sidewalk and back up the other. It was over after one lap." Photos from smaller towns showed dozens of people maybe, mostly elderly, mostly white, mostly affluent, holding signs on street corners. But here's the kicker. By 3:30 p.m., it was over. The New York Police Department reported the majority of No Kings protests dispersed as of around 3:30 p.m. local time, with all traffic closures lifted. The protests started around noon, 3.5 hours. In Washington, D.C., where the event was scheduled from noon to 2 p.m., media reports noted crowds in D.C. started to disperse by 2:33. Some left before it officially ended. The greatest protest in American history lasted 3.5 hours. Everyone home before dinner? Look at the photos. The crowds skew heavily older, whiter, and more affluent than any actual grassroots movement. Compare this to real movements. The Tea Party rallies where working people took vacation days. Trucker convoys where people lost income. Real grassroots movements involve sacrifice. These protests were scheduled noon to 2 p.m. so nobody missed brunch. Independent crowd scientists actually estimated between 4.4 and maybe on the high end 6.5 million, not 7 million. And even those are based on organizer reports, not systematic verification. So while this $2.3 billion machine staged photo ops this past Saturday, who was securing the DC protest? Well, 200 Capitol police officers working without pay. Saturday, October 18th, was day 18 of the government shutdown, day 18 of Democrats refusing to pass a budget without health care for illegal immigrants, and 200 officers worked their weekend unpaid. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer marched with protesters. Bernie Sanders lectured about power. Elizabeth Warren preached about Republicans losing their spine while her party refused to pay the military. Think about what that means. Schumer, 44 years wielding federal power, controlling legislation, directing billions. Sanders, 34 years. Warren, over a decade in the Senate after years at Harvard. Combined, 90 plus years in the positions of power. And they are lecturing about kings while refusing to fund the government. Speaker Mike Johnson nailed it. If President Trump was a king, the government would be open right now. If President Trump was a king, they would not have the ability to engage in that free speech exercise. Exactly. Trump can't unilaterally reopen the government. He needs Congress to pass a budget. But Chucky won't bring it to a vote because Democrats wanted their protests first. They couldn't face their rabid base if they had compromised. The real kings are the ones with $2.3 billion for protests. The ones in power for decades. The ones coordinating 400 organizations while calling it grassroots. Meanwhile, Trump worked. Sunday night, just 2 days ago, returning from Mar-a-Lago. I looked at the people. They are not representative of this country. The demonstrations were very small, very ineffective, and the people were whacked out. I'm not a king. I work my butt off to make our country great. That's all it is. Let's be clear. They are not protesting authoritarianism. They are protesting success. Trump achieved what Biden couldn't, freeing every living Israeli hostage. 738 days in captivity ended. He signed the accord in Egypt, addressed the Knesset. Even Bill Clinton and Susan Rice gave him credit. Border crossings down 95%. March 2024 under Biden, 137,473 crossings. March 2025 under Trump, 7,181. That's a small city of illegal immigrants monthly under Biden, stopped in just 9 months. Under Biden, drugs flowed in, cartel operatives flowed in. Potential terrorists like the Hamas operative just arrested in Louisiana who participated in October 7th flowed in unchecked. Trump reversed it. Wall construction resumed. Remain in Mexico enforced. Catch and release over. Cartels designated as foreign terrorist organizations. Economy improving. Inflation dropping. Energy production is up. Manufacturing returning. Trump can't even open the government alone. He needs Congress, negotiation, compromise. That's not a king. That's a constitutional republic with checks and balances. They are mad because he's delivering. Their predictions of disaster haven't materialized. America is winning. So let me recap. Asra Nomani exposed a $2.3 billion machine. 400 organizations disguised as grassroots. Jason Rantz documented violence the media hides. Think Antifa using crowds as shields. The math destroyed their claims. Tiny gatherings. Everyone's home by 3:30? The hypocrisy exposed itself. Democrats are acting like the kings while accusing that of Trump. Don't let the memory hold this. This was a $2.3 billion operation that lasted just 3 hours, covered for violence, and distracted from Trump's achievements. Follow the money. Soros and the DNC. Watch the violence. 2020 playbook. Do the math. Numbers just don't add up. See the hypocrisy. Democrats with billions and decades in power want to be the new aristocracy. Share this episode. Expose the truth. Don't let this get buried. Find us at o'connorsrightstand.com and follow me on X at O'Connor Podcasts. Deep dives every Tuesday and Thursday. Quick Strike podcasts every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Until next time, Patriots, stay strong, stay informed, and stay unapologetically American. This is John O'Connor, signing off.